Hey guys, Darren here. Welcome to Mayhem Country Living. Today we are going to read chapter 2, Little House in the Big Woods. I hope you enjoyed the first chapter, and I got a decent response from people who enjoyed it, and it's just nice. Like I said, I'm not trying to make $1 million off of this or anything like that. With everything and the isolation and all that stuff that's going on, I thought this might be something nice to do. So, chapter 2. We left off with Laura and Mary comparing their dolls and talking to Pa. More to come. Okay guys, now we're back, and we left off in chapter 1 where Pa had been fiddling and talked about the man who cut 2 cat holes in his front door while he was cleaning his traps. Now, chapter 2, winter days and winter nights. Now, I will preface everything by saying I am not an orator, so I will misspell and misspace some words. So here we go. Winter days and winter nights. Chapter 2. Little House in the Big Woods. The first snow came and the bitter cold. Every morning Pa took his gun and his traps and was gone all day in the big woods, setting the small traps for muskrats and mink along the creeks and the middle-sized trap for foxes and wolves in the woods. He set out the big bear traps, hoping to get a fat bear before they all went into the dens for the winter. One morning he came back, took the horses and sled, and hurried away again. He shot a bear. Laura and Mary jumped up and down and clapped their hands. They were so glad. Mary shouted, "I want the drumstick! I want the drumstick!" Mary did not know how big a bear's drumstick is. When Pa came back, he had both a bear and a pig in his wagon. He had been going through the woods with a big bear trap in his hands and the gun on his shoulder. When he walked around a pine tree covering it with snow, the bear was behind the tree. The bear had just killed the pig and was picking it up to eat it. And Pa said the bear was standing up on his hind legs, holding the pig in its paws, just as though they were hands. Pa shot the bear. There was no way of knowing where the pig came from, nor whose pig it was. "So I just brought home the bacon," Pa said. There was plenty of fresh meat to last for a long time. The days and the nights were so cold that the pork in a box and the bear meat hanging in the little shed outside the back door was solidly frozen and did not thaw. When Mom wanted fresh meat for dinner, Pa took the axe and cut off a hunk of frozen bear meat or pork. But the sausage balls or the salt pork or the smoked hams and the venison, Ma could get for herself from the shed on the attic. The snow kept coming till it was drifted and banked against the house. In the morning, the window panes were covered with frost and beautiful pictures of trees and flowers and fairies. Now guys, we call that hoarfrost. H-O-A-R. Ma said that Jack Frost came in the night and made the pictures while everyone was asleep. Laura thought that Jack Frost was a little man all snowy white, wearing a glittering white pointed cap and soft white knee boots made of deerskin. His coat was white and his mittens were white, and he did not carry a gun on his back, but in his hands he had shining sharp tools with which he carved the pictures. Laura and Mary were allowed to take Ma's thimble and make a pretty pattern of circles in the frost on the glass, but they never spoiled the pictures that Jack Frost had made in the night. When they put their mouths close to the pane and blew their breath on it, the white frost melted and ran in drops down the glass. They could see the drifts of snow outdoors and the great trees standing bare and black, making thin blue shadows on the white snow. Laura and Mary helped Ma with the work. Every morning there were the dishes to wipe. Mary wiped more of them than Laura because she was bigger. But Laura always wiped carefully her own little cup and plate. By the time the dishes were all wiped and set away, the trundle was aired. Then, standing one on each side, Laura and Mary straightened the covers, tucked them in well at the foot and the sides, plumped up the pillows, and put them in place. Then, Ma pushed the trundle bed into place under the big bed. After that was done, Ma began the work that belonged to the day. Each day had its own proper work, Mama used to say. Wash on Monday, iron on Tuesday, mend on Wednesday, churn on Thursday, clean on Friday, bake on Saturday, rest on Sunday. Laura liked the churning and the baking days best of all of the week. In the winter, the cream was not yellow as it was in the summer, and butter churned from it was white and not so pretty. Ma liked everything on her table to be pretty, so in the wintertime she colored the butter. After she put the cream in the tall crockery churn and set it near the stove to warm, she washed and scraped a long orange-colored carrot. Then she grated it on the bottom of the old leaky tin pan that Pa had punched full of nail holes for her. Ma rubbed the carrot across the roughness until she rubbed it all through the holes, and when she lifted up the pan, there was a soft, juicy mound of grated carrot. She put this in a little pan of milk on the stove, and when the milk was hot, she poured milk and carrot into a cloth bag. Then she squeezed the bright yellow milk into the churn, where it colored all the cream. Now the butter would be yellow. Laura and Mary were allowed to eat the carrot after the milk had been squeezed out. Mary thought she ought to have the larger share because she was older, and Laura said she should have it because she was littler. But Ma said they must divide it evenly. It was very good. When the cream was ready, Ma scalded the long wooden churn dash, put it in the churn, and dropped the wooden churn cover over it. The churn cover had a little round hole in the middle, and Ma moved the dash up and down through the hole. She churned for a long time. Mary could sometimes churn while Mama rested, but the dash was too heavy for Laura. At first the splashes of cream showed thick and smooth around the little hole. After a long time, they began to look grainy. That's when it's starting to separate. We've done this in videos before. Then Ma churned more slowly, and on the dash there began to appear tiny grains of yellow butter. When Ma took off the churn cover, there was the butter in a golden lump, drowning in the buttermilk. Then Ma took the lump out with a wooden paddle into a wooden bowl, and she washed it many times in cold water, turning it over and over, working with the paddle until the water ran clear. After that she salted it. Now came the best part of the churning. Ma molded the butter. On the loose bottom of the wooden butter mold was carved the pictures of a strawberry with 2 strawberry leaves. With a paddle, Ma packed butter tightly into the mold until it was full. Then she turned it upside down over a plate and pushed on the handle of the loose bottom. The little fat, firm pat of golden butter came out, with a strawberry and its leaves molded on the top. Laura and Mary watched breathless, one on each side of Ma, while the golden little butter pats, each with a strawberry on the top, dropped onto the plate as Ma put the butter through the mold. Then Ma gave them each a drink of good fresh buttermilk. On Saturdays, when Ma made the bread, they each had a little piece of dough to make into a little loaf. They might have a bit of cookie dough, too, to make little cookies, and once Laura even made a pie in her patty pan. After the day's work was done, Ma sometimes cut paper dolls for them. She cut the dolls out of the stiff white paper and drew the faces with a pencil. Then from bits of colored paper, she cut dresses and hats, ribbons and lace, so that Laura and Mary could dress their dolls beautifully. I remember doing this with my family, with my mother, and we made lace chains of dolls, and we did also make corncob dolls. One day we'll do that in videos, if you guys would like to. It's interesting. But the best time of all was at night when Pa came home. He would come in from his tramping through the snowy woods with icicles hanging on the ends of his mustache. He would hang his gun on the wall over the door, throw off his fur cap and coat and mittens, and call, "Where's my little half pint of sweet cider half drunk up?" That was Laura, because she was so small. Laura and Mary would run to climb onto his knee and sit there while he warmed himself by the fire. Then he would put on his coat and cap and mittens again and go out to do the chores and bring in plenty of wood for the fire. Sometimes, when Pa walked his trap lines quickly because the traps were empty, or when he had got some game together sooner than usual, he would come home early. Then they would have time to play with Laura and Mary. One game they loved was called Mad Dog. Pa would run his fingers through his thick brown hair, standing it all up on end. Then he dropped on all fours and growling, he chased Laura and Mary all through the room, trying to get them cornered where they couldn't get away. They were quick at dodging and running, but once he caught them against the wood box behind the stove. They couldn't get past Pa, and there was no other way out. Then Pa growled so terribly, his hair was so wild, and his eyes were so fierce that it all seemed real. Mary was so frightened she could not move. But as Pa came nearer, Laura screamed, and with a wild leap, a scramble, she went over the wood box, dragging Mary with her. And at once there was no Mad Dog at all. There was only Pa standing with his blue eyes shining, looking at Laura. "Well," he said, "you're only a little half pint of cider half drunk up, but by jinx, you're as strong as a French horse. You shouldn't frighten the children so, Charles," Ma said. "Look how big their eyes are." Pa looked, and then he took down his fiddle, and he began to play and sing. Yankee Doodle went to town. He wore his striped trousers. He swore he couldn't see the town, there were so many houses. Laura and Mary forgot all about dog. And then he saw some great big guns, big as a log of maple, and every time they turned them round, it took 2 yokes of cattle. And every time they fired them off, it took a horn of powder. It made a noise like Father's gun, only a nation louder. Now guys, I'm laughing while I'm trying to say this, but this is talking about ultimately our independence. Yankee Doodle, etc., etc. I'm just I'm trying not to laugh while I'm reading it. Pa was keeping time with his foot, and Laura clapped her hands to the music while he sang. And I'll sing Yankee Doodle, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle. And I'll sing Yankee Doodle Dee, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle. All alone in the big woods, in the snow and the cold, and the log house was warm and snug and cozy. Pa and Mary and Laura and baby Carrie were comfortable and happy, especially at night. Then the fire was shining in the hearth, the cold and the dark and the wild beasts were all shut out. And Jack, the brindle bulldog, and Black Susan the cat lay blinking at the flames in the fireplace. Mary, in her rocking chair, sewing by the light of the lamp at the table. The lamp was bright and shining. There was salt in the bottom of its glass bowl. the kerosene to keep the kerosene from exploding, and there were bits of red flannel among the salt to make it pretty. It was pretty. Laura loved to look at the lamp with its glass chimney so clean and sparkling, its yellow flame burning so steadily, and its bowl of clear kerosene colored red by the bits of flannel. She loved to look at the fire in the fireplace, flickering and changing all the time, burning yellow and red, sometimes green above the logs, and hovering blue over the golden and ruby coals. And then Pa told stories. When Laura and Mary begged him for a story, he would take them to his knee and tickle their faces with his long whiskers until they laughed aloud. His eyes were blue and merry. One night, Pa looked at Black Susan, stretched herself before the fire and running her claws out and in, and he said, "Do you know that a panther is a cat? It's a great big wild cat." "No," said Laura. "Interestingly enough, Guy, we have a lot of panthers here in Alabama, but we're not allowed to tell you that because Fish and Game will not let us. How about that?" "Well, it is," said Pa. "Just imagine Black Susan bigger than Jack and fiercer than Jack when he growls. Then she would be just like a panther." He settled Laura and Mary comfortably onto his knees and said, "I'll tell you about Grandpa and the panther." "Your grandpa?" Laura said. "No, Laura, your grandpa, my father." "Oh," Laura said, and she wiggled closer against Pa's arms. She knew her grandpa. He lived far away in the big woods, in a big log house. Pa began. The story of Grandpa and the panther. "Your grandpa went to town one day and was late starting home. It was dark when he came riding his horse through the big woods, so dark he could hardly see the road. And when he heard a panther scream, he was frightened, for he had no gun." "How does a panther scream?" Laura asked. "Like a woman," said Pa, "like this." Then he screamed so that Laura and Mary shivered with terror. Now, guys, I will tell you this. I've been out in the woods along the Cahaba River, and they do that. It sounds like a woman screaming, and it will raise the hair on the back of your necks. It really will. And it is something you don't care to listen to. It's an eerie sound. We'll stop here for a second. More to come, guys. Remember, Pa had just screamed like a panther. Ma jumped in her chair and said, "Mercy, Charles!" But Laura and Mary loved to be scared like that. The horse, with Grandpa on him, ran fast, for it was frightened too, but it could not get away from the panther. The panther followed through the dark woods. It was a hungry panther, and it came as fast as the horse could run. It screamed now on this side of the road, now on the other side, and it was always close behind. I'm not even going to attempt to do it because I don't do it justice, but it sounds like a woman screaming, like that kind of thing, but really, really bad and really, really loud. It's an eerie sort of noise. Grandpa leaned forward in the saddle and urged the horse to run faster. The horse was running as fast as it possibly could, and still the panther screamed close behind. Then Grandpa caught a glimpse of it as it leaped from treetop to treetop, almost overhead. It was a huge black panther leaping through the air like Black Susan leaping onto a mouse. It was many, many times bigger than Black Susan. That was their cat. It was so big that if it leaped on Grandpa, it would kill him with its enormous slashing claws and its long, sharp teeth. Grandpa on his horse was running away from it, just as a mouse runs from a cat. The panther did not scream anymore. Grandpa did not see it anymore, but he knew it was still coming, leaping after him in the dark woods behind him. The horse ran with all its might. At last, the horse ran up to Grandpa's house. Grandpa saw the panther springing. Grandpa jumped off the horse against the door. He burst through the door and slammed it behind him. The panther landed on the horse's back, just where Grandpa had been. The horse screamed terribly and ran. He was running away into the big woods with the panther riding on his back and ripping his back with its claws. But Grandpa grabbed his gun from the wall and got to the window just in time to shoot the panther dead. Grandpa said he would never go again into the big woods without his gun. When Pa told this story, Laura and Mary shivered and snuggled closer to him. They were safe. They were snug, with his strong arms around them. They liked to be there just before the warm fire, with Black Susan purring on the hearth. And good job, Jack stretched out beside her. When they heard a wolf howl, Jack lifted his head and the hairs rose stiff against his back. But Laura and Mary listened to that lonely sound in the dark and the cold of the big woods, and they were not afraid. They were cozy and comfortable in their little house made of logs, with the snow drifting in and around and the wind crying because it could not get into the fire. That's the end of chapter 2. Alright guys, how about that? That was the end of chapter 2. Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House in the Big Woods. I hope you enjoyed it. We do not do any sort of professional audio quality recording. That is the way it is. You might hear birds, chickens, people, dogs. That is us. So, thanks for coming along for chapter 2. I hope you hang around for chapter 3. Just a second, you're going to see a picture of my ugly mug pup over here, as well as my beautiful wife on the opposite side. There's going to be some videos. If we are indeed your brand of wacky guys, take care of your people. Read to your kids. Read to your grandkids. They'll remember it.